there, folks. My name is Janaki.
And this is Madame Bathsheba.
And together we are Catomancy Tarot. So today, I thought I would hop on to film my response to Meg and Theia's tag, which is the only 10 indie decks. I recently did the only 10 mass market decks, and so I thought I would hop on this one as well. I've been watching other people's responses, and the consensus seems to be this is a really hard one. And it was made even harder for me because my two favorite indie decks of all time are out of print. So it felt, I don't know, it felt hard to not include them in this, but I understand the parameters, so I'm not going to show those two. My two favorite collage decks of all time are out of print, but I won't show them, I promise. I'll be good. And I tried really hard. Um, there's a few options here that I was really tempted to cheat by either, showing things out of print, but I didn't, or showing decks that are kind of like bonded pairs that Candy did. I have a few that I feel like are bonded pairs, but I didn't. I counted each one of them individually. So here we go. Without further hemming and hawing, I'll show you what made it into my top 10 indie decks.
Alrighty, folks, so the first deck I'm going to show you is a deck that I don't actually read with, which might be surprising that it's still in the top 10, but it has a very big visual presence in my life, and that is this tall boy number. This is the Abyssal Tarot by Greg Traw. I was worried that this one is out of print, but I double checked and it looks like there's still some copies up on his website, which is great because this deck is this is the deck that I mainly use for altar work, which for reasons that will soon become very clear. The cards are ginormous. I think they are the size of several tarot cards stacked one on top of the other. For reference, here are some Rider-Waite-Smith, and it can fit like 3 of them. It's a big boy. It's a big one. But as I mentioned, this is a deck that has a really big visual presence in my life, and that's because I use this deck exclusively for altar work. So the way I use this deck is every year as part of, I do this thing with 22 Teachings where we do a tarot reading forecast for the entire year. So the year ahead spread actually uses all 78 cards. So the way it works is every new moon cycle you get 6 new cards, which will always include like a major, a court card, and some pips as well. And so what I do is every new moon I change out. I use these as a sort of a backdrop to my altar space. And my altar is, as soon as you walk into my front door, you walk straight into my living room, and right there, facing the door is my altar. And so I see these cards every day, and they kind of like brighten up my apartment. And so I've come to really, really love this deck. It's just like it visually greets me every time I come home, and it serves a purpose outside of divination. The backs of the cards I also have a sticker of, and it's on the back of my phone, so it's another way that this deck just feels like really, really familiar to me. But at the same time, despite its familiarity, this is a deck of cards that is really visually quite busy. I think it's probably one of the busiest decks I have, which is kind of accounts for why it really actually does need to be this size in order to be appreciated. We've got a Madame Bathsheba coming to give her approval here. Um, and this is also like a very, very esoteric deck. So this deck operates on kind of some, it explores a lot of sort of esoteric symbols, and it encourages the reader to kind of like dive into dive into the symbolism and kind of like get lost in the cards. And I love them so much. And every time I look at one of these cards, you see something new. This deck also, right here, I have it in order, and you can see it operates on some like principles of color. So here we're looking at the suit of wands with these pinks. And it's just something that you can like really fall into. And then when I see a backdrop of these cards greet me, I just feel bright and welcomed, and I'm so glad this deck is in my life. It's really, really wonderful. But it's, it's impossible to shuffle. I keep it in order. And then as I go through my new moon cycles, I'll pull the cards for that phase of the year to use as a backdrop to my altar. And I love the source material in here. So there's a lot of like old school fantasy. There's a lot of, especially with some of the court cards. The deck creator is also in a metal band, and so this deck also has some kind of I don't know, old school metal aesthetics, which I really love. It's so beautiful. It's a deck that feels like home to me, so I'm really glad I got to include it here. So that's the Draxiodos Tarot. The next deck I'm going to show, I feel like is related somewhat, because I use this deck a lot for altar work as well. I'll use it for divination, but it also kind of operates on some similar like principles of color, and that's Tarot as Color by Ethel Colquhoun. I think this is a deck that's made lots of people's top tens already, and for really good reason. It's an esoteric deck made in the 70s by Ethel Colquhoun, who is a practicing Hermetic magician, and so all of the cards have the Hermetic titles attached to them. And it's a really, really potent, beautiful deck. It works well in readings. It works well as kind of like an icon for kind of more intentional like altar work kind of stuff. And it's fun to use this deck, to see this deck on my altar next to these cards. I think they work really well together, and yeah, it really kind of brightens up my home. And I have here's an opinion. Let's see what you guys think. I uh I I like this deck more than the Thoth deck. I said it. I said it. I know the Thoth deck isn't for everyone, and it has some like die hard fans, and it's not to say that that deck isn't iconic, but for me, if I want to reach for an esoteric deck that kind of has the esoteric titles, I prefer this one. I prefer the energy of this one over the Thoth deck, and it's really, really quite remarkable. I have a few kind of abstract style decks, but I think this one reigns queen over those. I also like to use this style of abstract deck in dream work, in dream readings. So yeah, A runner-up to this one in particular that I won't include here is the Dream Dust Shamanic Tarot, which is another kind of abstract style deck. But this one wins out for me. It's very beautiful, and you can absolutely get lost in it. And it's scented. Come on, come on. So good. So we'll put that one back in its lovely, lovely box. And moving right along. So the next deck is also the last in this kind of sequence of kind of altar style decks, but I do use this deck for divination also, and I also kind of will have it on my altar, and that is the Mysteries of the Black Madonna deck by Hettienne Grobler. And I believe this is one of those decks that is more expensive, hard to find, limited print runs. I got this deck at a discounted rate because it's a factory second, but I think she releases really small batches. She's about to make a third in this series, which is, and I think at that point she's going to release more of these. So it is still out there. But this is just another kind of very, a deck that's really potent. All of these altars were made by hand. And I think it's just a wonderful idea for deck making, and it's so inspiring, and the guidebook for this is is really, really quite excellent, and it feels like a very, very special deck, and one that I frequently I'll frequently have cards like this, or like a 3-card draw or something on my altar. And I love it so much. It is one of those decks that I read it a little bit less as a tarot deck, and it has somewhat of an oracle quality to it, just because so many of the cards are renamed, and you get kind of a biography of the particular saint or deity or effigy depicted in each of the cards, along with a little bit of a narrative. So that I had to include this one. So that kind of those are my 3 kind of special altar deck kind of like big hitters. And the next decks I'm going to show you are more of my daily readers, like decks that I draw for doing readings for myself and others. And the main deck I'm going to show you that kind of has become somewhat of a more of a workhorse deck for me is this one. This is the Ritual Tarot by Tierra May. You guys know this is a fave, and I had to include it here. This is the first edition, but a second edition is in print now, and I know she's working on a Kickstarter for a titled version. But this deck, despite in the first edition, you can tell my deck's a little bit, it's got a little bit of a bow, there's a lot of chipping, it's not holding up too well to the tests of time, but I've taken this deck with me to India and to Egypt, and it's become it's become kind of like a mainstay. And for me, it reads really, really well. My favorite decks to read with are decks that combine sort of the best of all three tarot systems. So there's elements of this deck that are very pippish. So you get a little bit of like a Marseille influence. There's elements of this deck that feel a little bit more Rider-Waite-Smith. And then in the majors, there's cards that do feel a little bit more Thoth related. And so to be able to kind of like have all of those things in one deck, I really like decks like that, and I find them really exciting to read with. And there's cards like this, or the Empress, I just find really quite beautiful. Yeah, it's become one of the decks that if I want to do a reading for someone, this is one of my one of the ones I'll reach for. And the other kind of like general good reader I have is another collage deck. And I had to choose a couple, right? Even if I can't show you my favorite two. But I decided I hemmed and hawed about which other collage deck would get top billing here. And for me, I think it's the Adapt Tarot. This is another deck that reads really well for me. And the images, sometimes I guess for me with some collage style decks, like the Voyager, for instance, or sometimes they can feel like really like there's just a bunch of images, but I feel like there's still elements of like storytelling within this deck. And like there's like, it feels like there's an action sequence, or I can really read into what's going on, or this opens like new interpretations for me. And for that reason, it's a really good reader, and it's one that I reach for quite often. And it also has like a lovely springtime, summertime vibe. I feel like the Ritual Tarot can be like quite serious. And this for me is a lot more bright and energizing. And I like it a lot. I like it quite a lot. I think some of the runners up for me I haven't had quite as long. Some honorable mentions would be like the Telesma or Daydreaming in C2, or even Runners of the Sun. But like this one for me, I've had a little bit long, or no, I've had Telesma longer. But anyways, this one for me reads really quite well. So that's why it's made it here. And the other deck that I'm going to show you that is just like a really good reader for me, I had to include one. I had to include a Marseille deck, and I think this is my favorite indie Marseille. I thought about including more than one indie Marseille, but then you get into like bonded Marseille pairings, and then I could only do this one. So this is the Claude Rocher Tarot from 1754. This is made by Yves Renaud, who's a master card maker in Switzerland. And this is my favorite. I think this is one of my favorite. I think it is. Okay, so I'm gonna stop using qualifiers. This is my favorite historical reproduction of a Marseille, and I love it because it's so messy. If you watched my Marseille collection videos, I go on at length about the particular qualities of this deck. It has these ghost lines, which some people might see and be like, oh, that's messy. They should really clean that up. And I'm like, no, I want the ghost lines, because to me, it's part of the like material history of the printing process of this kind of thing would happen if, you know, you laid the wood block, or you know it got smudged, or like you stacked things, and like I just love seeing those traces of the materiality of the historical processes on this. And I also love that some people kind of like will even read into those lines. I also love the brightness of the colors in this deck. And I think some of the court cards, as well as the majors, are facing a direction that they wouldn't normally. So there's a lot of mirroring in this, which I think mixes up. Marseille reading is sometimes quite directional, and so to have kind of a few characters that, you know, usually she would be facing this way, which can like alter meanings. And so yeah, I love this. I love this deck. It's for me, it's a really good mood deck. I love the hair on the star card. I think she looks like Hedwig from The Angry Inch, if you know those iconic wigs. Yeah, I really love this one. And I think it goes really well with another one of my top 10 indie decks, which I'll show you now. And that's the Living Altar Oracle deck. This is one of the few Oracle decks I decided to include, mostly because it was hard and I had to narrow it down. But this deck, this is a deck that I also is just another really good all-around reader for me. It works off of the Wheel of the Year, and to me, it just gives really clear readings. I really like working with it, and it's also like I feel like these two decks go really well together, and I often use them together. I think there's kind of like a quality of the messiness, and just the colors go really well together for me. Yeah, I think it's really good, and it makes me quite happy. Yeah, so yeah, totally. Look at that. Look at that. Yeah, I've talked about this. I made a video on my perfect pairs, and this was a pair back then, and it's still a pair now. Nothing's changed. I still like using them together. And it does have a lot of like temporal kind of cards, which are interesting to read. It's a very kind of cyclical deck, so I find it's useful in readings that help you figure out different stages, different sort of life stages. Yeah, so that's the Living Altar Oracle. So now I've gone through my kind of more high ceremonial decks. I've taken you through some of like my main readers, and the last three decks I have are kind of more like decks that kind of alter the mood, more kind of moody decks, I guess. And the first one I'm going to show you that's a favorite of mine is the Abyssal Tarot, and I've showed this deck quite a lot on my channel. Be forewarned, there's a lot of nudity in this deck. This is a underwater photography deck, and to me the images are just really beautiful. I reached for this. This is a quite personal deck to me. So for me, this is a really emotional reader. In my video on decks for each sign of the zodiac, this was my Cancer deck, and I'm a super duper Cancer. So I've got a lot of feelings. I've got so many feelings that I don't know what to do with them all. And so for me, um, this is a deck that kind of delves a little bit more into kind of like an interior emotional landscape. Some of the cards are kind of quite intense. Some of the cards are a lot more gentle and ethereal. But I just love the like richness of the world. This is my favorite card in the deck. I love those colors so much. Like this image is one of my favorite, like all time images in the decks that I have. Yeah, so I had to include a moody one in here, and that's the Abyssal Tarot. The next deck I'm going to show you is, it's called The Abstract Futures by Hilmas Ghost. And this Hilmas Ghost is an artist collective out of New York City. And this deck, I have a first edition, but I think the second edition is still available. This is a deck where, if you're familiar with Hilma Klint, she was like a pioneer in this art style at the turn of the century, and she was also a spiritualist, and she channeled a lot of her paintings. So the idea that a painter with this history of channeling art was her ghost is being channeled by this collective. So I love the lore, the story, the kind of engagement with this deck. This is my favorite card in the deck. I love this dirty lime green. I think it's so beautiful. I love the titles. And this is an entirely abstract deck. And it reads it gives me some like really interesting readings. I'll use this deck in combination with a few of my other abstract decks. And I think I don't think there's anything else quite on this level. This is a little bit of I found this deck secondhand, so I got a little bit of a discounted price. Otherwise, it is a little bit of a higher end indie deck. But to me, it feels quite magical. And I like kind of losing myself in the shapes and the contours and the colors. And to me, when you read it, it's kind of more about the interactions between the colors and the shapes than it is about kind of received wisdom about what the Five of Pentacles always means. So the meanings kind of come to life a little bit more in a really interesting way for me. And I think it's really quite beautiful. And I don't think there's anything else that quite can do what this deck does for me out there, which is another reason it's up here. So that is the Abstract Futures, which leaves us down to our very last deck. And this deck is one that I hemmed and hawed about the most, probably, because as you'll notice so far, I've only showed you one Oracle deck. And so this last position, I felt I had to give it to another Oracle deck, but which indie Oracle deck to choose from? It was quite hard. I narrowed it down to about 4 of them. And the reason it ended up going to this contender is kind of mostly because I've had it the longest. And the other sort of honorable mentions are the Graven Image, Images Oracle, which I picked up recently, but that has a bonded pair with an out-of-print deck, so I felt like that kind of disqualified it from this list. And then Runners of the Sun is an indie collage Oracle deck, but that would really just be like a stand-in for my all-time favorite collage Oracle deck, which is out of print, called Road to Nowhere. So instead, I picked this oldie but a goodie, which is the Dirt Gems. And I have the first edition, which comes in the terrible box where a card always stays at the bottom and you can never get it out. But I find this deck to be really gentle. I edged mine to continue the designs on the side, and it's one of my favorite deck mods. This is a plant oracle, and it goes well with almost everything, which I think is a great quality of an oracle deck, is that you can kind of it's like multi-purpose in that way. It can get along with like a lot of different kinds of folks, which I think is wonderful. And the other thing that I really adore about this deck is the guidebook is really quite trauma-informed. I think with a lot of oracle decks, especially kind of mass market oracle decks with some, of course, not all of them, but a lot don't seem to kind of, it's this like everything is just positive and roses and all, all that. But I don't, I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, with this one, it feels, it always feels like when I reach for this deck when I'm having a really hard time, and invariably the guidebook will kind of just like make me feel really seen and supported. And I often cry. This is if if there's a category of like best, it's got to be a good deck if it always, I don't know, if it always kind of promotes a strong emotional response. So that is the Dirt Gems. I think this is being picked up. Oh, this is a rumor. I'm going to start a rumor. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I saw on Instagram that this deck might be being picked up mass market. So if you want the second edition, which is gilded and comes in a sturdy, nice box, I think this is your last chance to get it before it goes mass market, which is exciting. It's exciting to see good decks be picked up, and yeah, but I guess that means it won't be indie anymore. But it's still indie, so it still counts, so it's still in my video. So yeah, that was my only 10 indie decks. Were there any surprises in here? Anyone that you knew it was gonna be in there? Anyone? Yeah. So I've been having fun watching other people's, and I will see you guys all next time. Bye for now.